Alright, so in this episode we're going to go through this rotary top gearbox. Some of you call it a cow pipe, some of you call it castle top, whatever you want to call it. This is the 4-speed gearbox that came after the legendary ratchet top gearbox. So this thing, as much as people don't want to admit it, this 4-speed is actually better than the ratchet top, in my opinion. This thing shifts better, it's smoother, you know, there's less issues with this thing. It just works really well. The only reason that people love the ratchet top is obviously for the jockey shift capabilities. There's so many different arms and shit you can put on those jockey shifts and they look so cool. These ones are a little bit different. Dale's flame shovel that I just did in the last video, it has one of these gearboxes in it with the jockey shift. Works perfectly fine. It's just a bit more notchy than your ratchet top gearbox, but these are a better gearbox. And for some reason, these things are like half the price of a ratchet top. In Australia, you're paying like $3,000 to $3,500 for a ratchet top. You can pick one of these up for like 1,500 bucks. So these are really good gearboxes. If you've got like an Evo or something you want to put in it, these are the perfect gearboxes for that. So if you've got one of these gearboxes in your bike at home and you know it's not playing the game, it's leaking all its oil out, you know, this is the video to watch. I'm going to go through this thing, completely rebuild it, top to bottom, make sure this thing doesn't leak when we put it back in the bike, and make sure we can give this thing back to the customer in great condition. So let's go through. To start off, I'm just going to pop this selector off the top. So this is what they call your rotary top. So I'm going to pop this hat off this gearbox and then we'll be able to have a look inside and see what works. Alright, so to pull this lid off is pretty simple. All we're really going to need is a 7/16 socket like this, and then we will need a 7/16 spanner as well. This one here is super annoying. It always fouls on our little shifter linkage here. So you're going to need a spanner to do this one. But basically, I will just speed up all the bits you don't want to see in this video, like me undoing all these bolts, and then we can just talk about the important things. Alright, so I've got all the bolts out. Like I said, this bolt doesn't come out. It's super annoying, but great design, Harley. So we're just going to get our little rubber mallet. Give this a little tender knock, just like that. Sweet. So let's pull this thing off together, eh? Have a look what we're working with. It looks like it's got a gasket on it that's not very old. So this has probably been, the gasket's probably just been done just to try and fix the leak that it's got. So it doesn't matter if you drop this stuff in the box, we're going to be completely pulling this apart, pulling this whole gear set out of here. So first glances, it looks pretty freaking nice in here. It is a later box. This is like a fucking, maybe an 82 or something, I think, but this is basically why they call it a rotary top. I think I have one actually. So this is a ratchet top lid and this is a rotary top lid. So another thing they call it is a barrel lid. So you can see it shifts its gears with this barrel, where this style has a flat plate where it shifts the gears from. This one works better in my opinion. This one is a bit annoying sometimes, but this is the differences, barrel, and then this is a rotary. Anyway, so there's not much you want to do to this thing. We're gonna maybe reseal this shifter selector and that's it. The rest of this is gonna stay the same because that all works nicely. So basically what we're looking at here, we'll just have a look at a few things here. So one thing to remember, don't lose your little, these are your little shifter shoes. So these guys sit on top of your selectors there. You don't want to lose them, but it all sort of looks pretty nice. So what I'm doing, I'm just looking at the lash or the float in these gears. So in our secondary cluster here, we got to have some float side to side. So that's third gear. That should do a bit of second gear. So that should do a bit of a move there. Yep. That doesn't look really good. See how much movement we've got there? So in our book, it's going to tell us how much movement there should be there. That's definitely too much. So we'll have to shim that when it comes to it. But basically we've got our lid off here. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take our main sprocket off here. So we just have to, we've got a little lock tab here. So we're just going to undo our little lock tab. Just like that. And to undo this nut, it's pretty annoying because you got this long shaft here, you can't just put a socket on it. So I've got this spanner here that I use, but if you've got the Jim's thing that undoes this, that's awesome. But this is what I use and it works a treat. So the reason I didn't take this guy off before I took the lid off is because you can put this gearbox in 2 gears like that, push them, just push our selectors apart. In 2 gears, the gearbox will be locked. And then with the gearbox locked, we can undo this guy. So this is left-hand thread, remember? So what you would usually do to tighten, you are going to do to loosen. So there it is. Alright, so there's our nut. Some of you might have a super nut, so it has a nut with a shoulder with a seal in the middle. This style can't fit it because of the gearbox support. Some other styles can. That's just another layer of protection against leaks. So your gear will just slide off like this. Just like that. So this is obviously our 4th gear here, our top gear. So now that I got this guy off, let's go ahead and take our kicker side off. So all these kicker bolts are generally 1/2 inch, unless they've been stripped and a bigger bolt or some shit has been put in. Gotta remember, these gearboxes are super old and they have copped an absolute hiding their whole lives. So to find a mint one of these days is becoming pretty rare. So go easy with these things. Don't over tighten stuff. Don't force stuff you shouldn't. Just something to remember with these dome nuts, sure they look really good, but when you put it together, I've had this before, someone's put a kicker cover on and they've gone, oh, I'll put these dome nuts on, and what they didn't realize was these threads were so long that the thread was bottoming out in the dome nut before it was tightening on the kicker cover. So they had all these on and they couldn't work out why the kicker cover was leaking. So just make sure you don't have too much thread hanging out of these if you're gonna run those. I personally aren't into them, but if you want to doll it up, sure, go for your life. So this will just pop off. The other thing you can do is take the pressure off your spring here. Someone's put a freaking bolt in that. That's not supposed to be there. I've got an absolute hosing of oil coming out the back of this. So what we'll do, so what you want to do, you just want to take the pressure off this spring. Sometimes you can come in, just use your pliers and pull it off. In this instance, this is super tight, so I'm just going to take the pressure off with this and then pull this lid off. Just like that. So this is just a run-of-the-mill $100 aftermarket kicker cover. So these things, always break and are super unreliable, but this one seems in okay shape. So make sure this works nice and easy. That is your throw out, so that is what your clutch arm pushes on, and that pushes this into your clutch pack, and all of the rest makes your clutch work. So that looks all right. Let's put that to the side. Another thing, these gearboxes are going to hose out oil. Don't do this in somewhere that you want to keep clean, because it will not be clean. So in this end bit here, this is usually where all of the rubbish collects. So there's usually a lot of parts there. This is your clutch push rod. You can just pull that straight out. You're going to check your throwout bearing. This is your throwout bearing. This is a late style throwout bearing. A lot of the time you just replace this with an early style because they're much stronger. But that looks all right. So all this looks all right. It's got the wrong bolts. So these should just be a normal hex bolt. It's got Allen key bolts in it. So someone has been through this already, which is all right. But now we've got that off. So what we want to do next, we want to go ahead and take our gear clusters out of here. So to do that, we've got to take out our secondary cluster first, and then our main cluster comes out. Before that though, we've got to take our gear selectors out. So the way you do that is pretty easy. On an early style, you're going to have a screw here that just goes into a little hole in the shaft, and then you knock it from this side. But on this one, we have a circlip on the end. So we just go ahead and get a little screwdriver and pop that circlip off. So pop this guy out. So there is our little circlip. And then all we do, there's a little hole on the end here. Just pop something in there and knock that out. So that is our gear selector shaft. See a little glue on the end, and there's a little O-ring there to stop it from leaking, which never does. So put that to the side. We can pull our gear selectors out of here. They are different, you can't mix them up. Don't worry about that. Put them to the side. So this thing has, I can see some part numbers in there. This thing has an aftermarket top gear in it. So someone's been through this thing and done some stuff. So like I said, next we want to pull out our secondary cluster here. So to do that, we have to knock the secondary shaft out. And if you have a look in the end here, this little plate that has a kicker gear stop on it, this holds your bearing, your main bearing in for your main shaft. It also has a little notch here that goes through your secondary shaft. And that's what holds the shaft in position and stops it from spinning. So we've got to take this plate out to be able to take that out, which means we have to take this kicker gear off. This is the gear that makes that noise that you hear when you... So when your kicker is coming back up, this is the noise you hear. So we can probably leave that on. I want to pull this out in one go. So I'm just going to undo these and then pull that to the side, and hopefully we can get this shaft out. Alright, so I just done a little bit of housekeeping. Keep all my little bits and pieces in a little bucket so I don't lose them. All the bigger stuff can sort of float around and do whatever it wants. So like I said, these are Allen keys. They should be hex bolts, but whatever, is what it is. So another thing on these 4 bolts you might find, a lot of times it's missing because you don't really need it. But this guy on the top, this is a little oil deflector. So this catches the oil and drops it on this gear. So a lot of the times that's missing or broken. Doesn't have to be there, but it's good to have. So now if we look in here, see I can move this like that, and then the shaft will come out. So I've just moved that out of the way, and now we'll knock this shaft out with a punch. We're knocking the shaft this direction. So let's give it a little, should come out pretty easy. It's on bearings. So just want to make sure that you pull it out and keep it in the order that you had it. Man, that is a new shaft. So someone has been through this. So then with this whole cluster will come out. You just gotta move it around a bit and it'll come out just like that. What do you want to do when you pull this out? There is a washer this side. Oh no, there's not. There's supposed to be a washer on one side of this, on this side, and that is what you shim to your desired float, but this doesn't have one, so that's an issue. We will put one in though. Oh, here it is. It's fallen down here. So I've had this before, but I've had it before where someone's put one of these gearboxes together, because when you put this in, you got to slide it in there, and then they didn't get it in there, and this just floated around in the bottom of the gearbox. So that lives there, and when you want to shim the float, you put a different size one of those guys in. So leave that there. So that is our secondary cluster. Let's put that to the side for now. I'm just going to put this back through there. In an early style, it's super annoying. These are all loose rollers in here, but in this style, they all stay together, which is super nice. So now that we have all that apart, what we want to do is knock the main shaft back, and that'll push this bearing race in this case out, and then we have to take a circlip out to be able to get the rest out. So you just take your hammer, just like that. So you see this whole assembly here that comes out. This is the plate that we unbolted. This is your bearing housing, and then all of this is all your kicker stuff that we were talking about. So this bearing housing just presses into the case of the gearbox here. So what's happening now, we've got this the whole way out, but it hits on this third gear here. And that's because third gear has a little circlip that we have to undo before the main shaft comes out the whole way. This circlip can be super, super annoying, but does a good job, really. So let me just struggle to get this out, and then we can move on. Oh. All right, I got it. That is an absolute prick to get that thing. So all we're gonna do is slide it all the way off, and then this gear comes off with it, and then we just keep knocking that out. We keep all that together like that. And there is our main shaft with kicker gear and all this idler stuff attached. So we put that to the side. As you can see, this thing makes a hell of a mess. Gearboxes are always fun and messy. So once again, here is, so this is our third gear. This is our third, fourth dog. What you want to look at is these things have a little mark. Well, hopefully that, it says high. So you're going to make sure that goes towards high gear. So I'm going to put that to the side together. And now we want to knock out our main gear or top gear or fourth gear. So same thing. There it is. So this gearbox has been rebuilt recently. I don't know why the thing leaks so badly, but you can see this is a new Andrews top gear. There's the part numbers on it if you want to know. It's got a new bush in it. This is the bush that I said always flogs out. So the way you test this is on your main shaft. Feels really good actually. So we want to test it without these seals in it. So I'm gonna pull these seals out when we go to test it, but that all looks pretty sweet. Put that on there. Be done with it. So now we are just left with a really dirty engine gearbox case here. It's had a repair down there that I can see. It's actually a really nice repair. But I'm gonna go over to my little parts washer and give this thing a really nice clean, and then we'll come back and have a look what we need to fix on this case. I can show you another gearbox that I have coming up. This one. So look at the inside of that guy. So this is a 3-speed reverse gearbox. So this is a very early gearbox. So that is another one that I've got coming up. I'm just leaving it in there just to see if I can penetrate some of those rusted bearings with this here diesel. Alright, so I have the case pretty well all cleaned up here. I just had to do a few little things, like all of the silicone they've used is still stuck around here, so I've got to scrape all that out because obviously I'll put some new stuff on. I pulled this seal out of here. I'll show you how we replace that when I get a seal kit for this thing. I basically just wanted to pull it down, see what this thing needed, order it all, and then we can knock this thing back together. But truth be told, it actually looks really good. I don't think I am gonna weld anything up on this case. It's had a really nice repair done through here and here. So whoever did that did a really nice job through here. You can only just see it once it's all clean. So really nice repairs through there. I was gonna weld this up and redo it, but I think I might just, because this didn't have this just had a regular old washer underneath it. So I think once I put a copper washer under this is gonna seal it up just fine. I'm pretty sure this has been put in on the piss as well. So it has. If you can see that, you can see that there's a gap this side and no gap that side. So this guy has been put in on the piss. So I think I'll just fix that with a file, just because I don't want to go through and weld that up, just in case it cracks anything around it. Because obviously when you weld aluminium, it'll shrink really quickly and crack stuff around it. So if you can get away with not welding it, that's the best. Here as well, you can see that it's had some case being chipped away there. Not the end of the world. What I'm gonna do, you saw this on all my other videos, when we come through, before we assemble this, we're gonna glue up all of these thread where they come through to the oil side. So that's gonna stop all our oil coming out of the thread. So we'll go through and glue all that up so it doesn't happen. And we'll also glue this up crazy once we have the whole gearbox together. It's just another layer of protection from the oil coming out of here. What I did notice is that these two holes are pretty well stripped out, so I might go through and helicoil them. That just holds our primary stuff on, so I might go through and helicoil them quickly, nothing crazy, but basically that is our gearbox case pretty well sorted. So let's go over. Like I said, I want to go through, work out what I need to order, and then order it all. So let's go through our main shaft and our countershaft and see if there's anything there that needs replacing. All right, so what we're gonna do, what I like to do when I'm pulling apart a gearbox assembly, so this is our correct countershaft assembly, so 77 to 84-ish. So that is us there. What I want to do, put that up here, and then if we just go through our cluster here and make sure what we have here is what we have there, we make sure it's got everything. It's hard to know when something's missing. So let's pull this apart. That is our shim. So number 1 here, washer. So you can, like I said, you can buy different size washers to adjust your float in there. So that's that. This guy, number 2, is our first gear. So we just have a little bit of a look at this thing, look at where our dogs hit it. Thing looks pretty freaking nice. So the other thing we want to check, we want to put that back on there and just check if it's got any side to side like this, like that. And that is really nice. So if that was bad, we would replace this bush in here. There's a little bush here at number 3 and 4. So this is 4, that is our washer, lives there. And this is 3, this is our bush. So they're all good. That there like that. And now to come off number 5 is our shifter clutch or our dog. That's that guy. Like I said, make sure this guy, doesn't matter which way around it goes, but let's put it back the same way just because we know it works that way. And then the next thing, I just like to see if this spins nicely and if it has any movement the same as first gear. That looks fine because you have a clip on this one the same as our third gear when we took it out of the box. So that has a clip there, that number 6 and 7, but that all seems super nice, turns nicely, has no side to side. And then at the end is our number 12, which is our thrust washer. He looks nice. As you can see, there is a bearing number in there if you want it. It is B1212, a Koyo bearing. These are all brand new bearings. I know I said I was going to do a complete rebuild on this thing, but at the same time, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So all this stuff is super nice. I'm just going to leave it alone. See that? There's the Andrews gear as well. So this is a full Andrews cluster here. So that's pretty cool. It's got nice stuff in it. Too bad it was leaking like a sieve. So all this back together. Nice, that there. That is our countershaft sorted. That all looks super nice. I'm going to put that straight back in the way it is. So let's find the page for our main shaft and have a look at that. Alright, so here we have our main shaft and main drive gear. So that is our whole setup there, and I have this around the wrong way, but this is basically what we see there. So first thing we want to do, we want to take this nut off. So it's got a little lock washer here, so we just want to undo that with a screwdriver. I will be replacing this, so not the end of the world. It's pretty tricky with stuff in one end, but then we want to rattle this nut off. Just like that. We don't want to take it the whole way off because this gear here, this is the kicker gear. We might have to pull this off. Sometimes they pop off and sometimes you need a puller. So looks like we are going to need a puller. So I'll get my puller and then we'll pull this thing off. Alright, so this is the puller that I used to pull this gear off. All I did was put that in there and pull it like that. Just a little trick, make sure you have this nut on when you use the puller. Because if you don't have that nut on, it's very thin at the top here. Let me take this off. So let's start with that. So we got a nut. Have a look at our little book here. So nut, yes. Lock washer, yes. And then our kicker stuff. So nut, lock washer, and then our kicker gear stuff. One half of it, the other half of it, our spring, our little retainer, and then this is our little bearing. Feels pretty nice, but I think I'm going to replace this bearing just because I'm here. They're super cheap, I might as well replace it. So the other thing we want to check is this is half of our kicker gear, right? So this guy goes on the end like that, and then that slips in there. Now, 2 reasons why your kicker will slip. Don't lose your little key either. 2 reasons your kicker's gonna slip. If these teeth are absolutely flogged out, check there is good mesh in the teeth. Just like that. Make sure that it meshes nicely. And the other reason is if this gear does this on the shaft, they won't mesh properly. So that is super nice. There's no play there at all. So they are good. As I said, I'm going to pull this bearing out and replace that. So all that is, once again, is a lock washer. Undo that nut, the whole bearing will come off. So I'm going to go through, we'll order a bearing. I won't bother taking this out one out until we get the new one. So all this looks nice. I'll order a bearing, and that is pretty well it for the main shaft and countershaft. Alright, so the super important thing we want to check out is our top gear here. Now we want to make sure this bush is super nice on our shaft here. Now it's got a bit of rust there, but that's obviously where nothing sits. So right here is where our seal sits, and this is probably somewhere where this guy sits. So what we want to do to check this bush, we want to pull these seals out, because that'll, a new seal will make it feel weird. So just pull that out like that. We will get a new one of these in our kit, so throw that away. So what we want to do, we just want to put this on there and feel our fit. There's absolutely no movement in that. So usually when you see a shit one, this will move heaps. Go back and forth, really notchy, and that is what will cause a lot of gearbox noise and vibration. This one is minty. So usually you're going to be replacing this. I don't have to, lucky me. This video is not as in-depth as I thought it'd be, so I'll have to do another one when all this is fucked and I can show you how to fix it all. So this is just going to be basically a reseal. Obviously I'll replace this bearing here, but reseal, regasket, and hopefully this thing is good as gold. So the last thing I want to do, because we're just going to order parts now, I need to work out what shim I need to use in my case for my countershaft here. So let's go through and do some measuring and work out what we need. Alright, so basically what we're doing here, we're going to put our countershaft back in, and we need to measure our float. So an easy way to do this, stand it up, jam that in there like that. Sometimes I'm making a mess out of this. This guy always falls out. So you need to get him in there between the gear set and the case. All has to be pretty lined up to fit this. So that's started, and now I will put my, this way I need to go through. So it's hitting my little guy, so you just gotta jam something in there to move spacer around. I'm sure people will go, "Rock, there's a heaps better way to do that," but that's it. So the gear is in there, and you see how it will move side to side. So we want to measure that. So in the book it says like 7 to 12 thou or something. So let's chuck a feeler gauge in there and see what we are working with. Unfortunately, I have ruined my thousandths ones, so I'm using metric at the moment. My imperial ones were in my tool roll on my bike and obviously have rattled themselves to pieces and rattled all of the letters off and numbers off. So we'll just slowly go through. What was that? 0.25. So this is 0.3. Still plenty there. What's next? 0.35. There it is. 0.35. So So I reckon that is it. Let's try 0.4 just to be sure, but I think 0.3 is it. So 0.4. Oh, 0.4 goes. So we'll call it 0.4. So how much lash we got there? We got 15 thou. So we've got a bit much there. So what we do, so we know we got 15 thou. So we want to, let's say we want to cut that in half. So let's pull this back out. Pull all of this, yep, back apart. And what we do, we just measure this guy. So he is 70 thou. So we want to go, let's say 75 or bigger. So if there's between a 75 and an 80 thou shim, that's what we want to get. So that's what I need to order. So basically that's all we can do until I get some parts for this thing. So I'll get ordering, and when we come back, we will start putting this thing together. All right, so I have all my bits here to rebuild this gearbox, all the gaskets, I have a bearing, I have some spacers that I've ordered here. Before we get into putting this bearing in and doing all that sort of stuff, let's tackle the case, because we want to glue some stuff in this case before we put all the guts in it. So we might as well put that in so it has a bit of time to cure before we put all the guts in it. So what I'm doing to glue up this thing, basically what I'm doing, all these studs you see that come through into the gear case, they're all the studs for our gearbox plate here. And they all come through into the gearbox case. So they are all filled with oil. So what happens is these things just weep. All the oil weeps out of these, and that's pretty well where this gearbox is leaking from. So what I'm gonna do, we're gonna glue up all those little holes and stuff before we put this together so the oil can't go out there. So what I'm gonna use to do that is this Loctite gasket maker. This is just like an RTV gray silicone max. Now you wanna buy the good shit, don't buy the crap. You want the stuff that says things like may be harmful if swallowed, causes skin irritation, may be an allergic skin reaction, causes serious eye damage, may cause cancer, may cause damage to the following organs. That's the sort of shit you want to see on the back of your glue. So let's go through, pull this thing apart, and let's start gluing up these little studs. So firstly, you want to clean this thing. So I've gone through this thing really heavily with brake clean, so that is super clean in there. So all I'm going to do is put this shit on my finger, because like it says, it causes skin irritation. So if you want to, you can put some gloves on, or if you're like me, a tough guy, you can just run it like this. So make sure you don't do this in a well ventilated room. You want to be in a tight room with no ventilation so you can really, you know, have the best experience with this stuff. So I'm just going through, just putting a good amount of this shit on there so that we don't have any leaks when we put this back together. Alright, so like I said, you want to be very liberal with this stuff. You really want to get it in there. That guy was the main culprit for the leak, so I've absolutely doused him in goo there. So I've just wiped off the excess. So down in this corner where the bearing is, there is quite a large one. You just want to make sure you don't plug these holes here. So you've got oil holes here. Just make sure you don't plug those things. So now that we're waiting for this thing to dry, let's go through and put our main bearing in now. I've got myself a Jim's Trans bearing. So non-binary bearing here. So let's put that thing in. All right, so this guy is super straightforward. All it is a nut and a lock washer here. I've already undone the lock washer and the nut. So all we do, pull this guy off. In my little gasket kit I bought is a replacement one of these. So that will be nice. All we want to do is knock our bearing off. So I'm just going to do that in the press. I'm going to press the shaft out, then I'm going to press the new bearing in, and then we'll put it back together. You don't need to watch me do that. All right, so I have pressed my brand new bearing into this guy. Spins nicely. Whenever you press something in, you want to make sure it spins. Sometimes if you press a bearing into a boss like this that's too small, it'll actually put pressure on the inner and it won't spin anymore. That'll make your bearing fail. So just make sure this thing spins nicely. That's sweet. If you want to have a look, that gear just comes off like that, and that is your idlers and stuff. But like I said, this shaft looks absolutely brand new. The person who put this box together must have just bought a whole new internals and then kept the case. So what I'm going to do on this quickly before we put this together, I'm going to put this in the lathe and just take off a bit of this surface rust, and where these seals have been sitting, you can sort of see a bit of a witness mark. So I'm just going to get a little bit of emery and fix it up in the lathe, and then we'll put this back together. All right, so I've been through this thing. All I used was a bit of 800 with some oil, and you can see the thing comes up pretty well brand new. I did the little spot where our kicker gear slides as well. So brand spanker. So let's put this back together. That goes that way like that, and then our bearing on top, facing out. So we want the bearing facing out like that. He sits on there. We will put that together. We need to press that on there, and then it's just our lock washer and nut, and then that is done. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we have to fit our counter assembly in the box again, because remember I had to change the spacers. So I got new spacers, but I couldn't get exactly the size I wanted. So these are a little bit bigger. So we're going to try this, and if it doesn't fit, I'm going to show you how we make it a little bit smaller. All right, so my Sikaflex in here is touch dry, so I can go through here and test fit my Countershaft in here. So remember, this spacer that we have is a bit small. So this is 65. I think I wanted to go 7 thou bigger. So I bought these 74s was the next size up that I could get. But if this is too big, you can press out these little guys here, and you can machine them to hit that float that you're chasing. So like I said, this is 74 or something. Yep, so this is about 10 thou bigger than this one. So I'm going to put this together now with our new spacer and just see what our float is. So let's go through and jam this back together. So I'm going to see if I can sneak this guy down in here. Just. There's my little screwdriver. So there it is. Just looking at it, that is mint. Hear that tiny little bit of float it's got in there? Just for argument's sake, I'll go ahead and measure this with some feeler gauges, but that feels perfect to me. So I'll just give it a quick measure. I'm gonna guess, I'm working in metric. As I said, I have destroyed my Imperial ones. Oh, what a guess. So that was 0.2. I'm gonna go 0.15. Like I said, sometimes it's better going the bigger size with your spacers, and then it takes up any discrepancy that you might have had. So that pisses in. So what's that? 5 thou. Perfect. So that is exactly what we want. So I don't have to push one of those bushes out and machine it. So that is mint. As you can see, that spins nicely. So take this apart again. Take that apart. So that is the spacer we are using. So put this stuff to the side. And then there's really nothing stopping us from starting to assemble this. Obviously, this is going to be the opposite to when we put it together. So let's get all our stuff laid out and ready to go in. So obviously our main shaft's got to go in first. Let's get all the gears and everything ready for that. Alright, so I've pretty well everything set out here to put my main shaft in my case here. I always like to double check in the book what sort of, orientation all this goes back together, because they fucking change heaps. Like there's a main shaft from 66 to 78, then there's 78 to 84, and then, there's all sorts of different variations from that. And then if you have a different year case with different year internals, it changes again. Like this is sort of late internals in an earlier box because it's missing one of these parts here, which in the later boxes, they have this bearing press into a boss and then press into the case. Just in case that if you spin the bearing in this case, the case is fucked. But if you had a boss and spin the bearing in the boss, you can just replace the boss. So sometimes it helps to go through and work out what case you're working with, what internals you're working with, and make sure that you have the right parts to make it happen. So basically, what I want to do first in our top gear, so this is our top gear, and this is where our final drive sprocket sits, so he bolts on the end there. What you want to do first is put this here seal on. You don't want to do that last. You want to do that now when it's nice and easy. So sometimes it's easy with these things to get them started, and sometimes you just get the right size socket. Just like that. And I just want it flush, so I'm just going to go like this. I want it flush with the end. If you push this too far, it ends up hitting your bush inside and then sort of tweaks itself. So you don't want that. You just want it nice and level. So that is that guy. So that's all together. Now that that's together, we might as well put this in the case. What I always like to do is put a little bit of grease on this stuff, just so it's got a bit of lubrication until the oil gets in there when the thing's really working. So we want to put that just like that in the case. Make sure she spins. Like I said, in the later boxes where you have a bush for your main bearing there, sometimes when you press it all together, it gets a bit tight. So you want to make sure that spins before we go any further. All right, so now that we know that that spins, this is basically the direction in which my main shaft goes in. So this is our dog, that's what our selector. Just make sure you've got the high pointing towards high gear, so this top gear. And then we just have a washer and then the clip. So I just like to put same thing, put a bit of grease on this, just so it has something until the oil gets in there. Sure, you can use assembly lube, but I find it drips everywhere and sort of makes a mess because we still want to seal some stuff up. So with grease, it's just a bit more direct, and it actually holds some stuff in there when you need it to. So basically all we do is put this through. We just want to feed our gears on in the direction they are. So third gear through like that. And then we want to put our washer and then the clip. And like I said, look at your book. It'll show you which direction. You're never too good to look at your book. Put a bit of grease on this bush on the inside too, because that's going to take a little bit to get oil in it. Grease that up. Jam this thing together. Oh, I've forgotten this bit. See, it always pays to look at your book. So remember, your dog faces towards high gear. So that in there like that. And then we put third over. Third goes in there like that. And then we have our washer. Hopefully you guys can see this. Our little washer goes on there, and then our clip. Clip is much easier to put on than what it is to take off. Like it's a pain to take off. Oh, so can be a bit of a fiddle. Just want to get a nice little screwdriver. Just be very ginger with this thing. You don't want to stretch it. So you want to push that back until it sits in the little groove. You'll hear a nice click. There it is. So just give it a little play around with. That is on there. So third gear spins nice. Just need to put our dog on like that. And then the last bit is knocking this in. So you're going to knock this into the case. Every time I seem to do this, a lot of people have a whinge that I'm hitting the bearing, but man, these bearings are so strong, that little bit of axial load is not going to hurt it. So I just got to send this home. That is pretty well home. There it is. That's home. All this spins. Ow. Dog goes side to side. All is good there. So that is our main shaft in. Let's go ahead and put our countershaft in. Might as well do this in real time so you can actually see how quick this is. So countershaft there, all assembled. So you can just leave this assembled as long as you've checked all this. Doesn't have much movement and all that stuff. That all seems pretty nice, so you can leave that assembled. So all we want to do with our countershaft here, just want to put our O-ring on the end of it. So in my little gasket kit that I bought, there's going to be an O-ring in there. Looks like that one. Nope, that ain't it. This one. That looks better. There she is. And once again, give this guy a grease up. Oh yeah. Alright, so same thing as when we test fit this thing. Put this all together and then we'll put the washer in afterwards. There's that. My freaking, the copper bit on that has come off, has come down a bit. There we go. So get our washer, put him in there. Oh, fell in that time, I dropped it. So sometimes you can get in through this hole here and help yourself out a bit. There it is. Push my shaft through. This is a bit of a fiddly bit, but if you've done it a few times, it goes together pretty nicely. So then we just tap our shaft in the end here, ensuring we don't go too far like that and we don't fuck our O-ring. So that is that. Gearbox is together. Make sure the play's there. It is. That's nice. So now we want to put this guy on. So you know this guy here, he holds our countershaft in position and also has the kicker gear stop on it. So we just want to rotate this shaft. Just rotate this shaft just to make sure that goes in there like that. So rotate a bit more. There. So now I'm going to get my hardware and bolt this guy in. Alright, so putting these bolts in. I'm going to use a bit of Loctite on these just because I do not want these to come out. They are not in the main case area, so they won't, you know, do a heap of damage if they come out, but still really don't want them coming out. Like I said, these aren't the correct bolts for it, but these are all your cap head screws like this are all high tensile, so I don't have to worry about them being a low tensile. So put them in. I'm trying to do this so you can see, and I've got to see at the same time. So if you guys can't see, tough luck, you're not doing the job. So I'm just going to hold this guy up into my countershaft to make sure that it's in the right spot when I tighten this down. So you want to tighten these down evenly, because otherwise this plate will go a bit skew-if, and you don't want that. So like I said, nice and even, a little bit on each. Don't need to bend the plate. Sweet. So basically after you do everything like that, just make sure your box still spins. Right. Spins nice, all that dogs move around, changing gear and stuff. Sweet. So we might as well put our kicker gear stuff together. This can be a little bit annoying because of this spring behind it, but we will adapt and overcome. I don't need that book anymore. You can go to the side. Once again, a bit of grease on where this kicker gear is going to be moving. This guy has a little brass bush in it, so just make sure he's good. Make sure it's a good seat on that. We've been through that when we pulled it apart, so that's nice. I'm gonna load him up. So, a little trick when you're putting these together. If you've got a gearbox that doesn't like to engage this, maybe it skips every now and then, little trick with this spring, my buddy Ollie taught me. Absolutely swing off it like this. So you're making it bigger, which is gonna put more pressure on these teeth and make sure it doesn't slip when you're trying to kick it. So I just like to give this a bit of a, just like that. So I've pretty well doubled the size of it now. So he is gonna work mint. So let's put this together. Let's see if I can do it. Don't forget your key. Some of them have 2 keys. This guy just has 1 key. So make sure you put this in the correct direction too. You can go in like this and then it's super loose, or you can put it in the right direction and it's nice and tight. Sweet, there's the key. Oh, idiot, you gotta put the key on afterwards. So it goes this guy, goes our spring, right? And then it goes this guy, spring lives in there. And then we put the key on, idiot. Just like that, key. And then our end bit, without pushing the key out. That's the main thing here. Don't want to push that key out. Oh, come on, bro. No, a key is being a little bit annoying. That's all right. Because I put all this pressure on this here thing now. Come on, push the key back in for me. There it is. So we also have our lock washer on this. Don't forget that guy. Now put our nut on before we lose this. Yes. So once I tighten this up, you'll be able to hear why we stretch that spring. Pretty sure this is 1 inch. I'm just gonna get my rattle gun and rattle that up. So don't go crazy on this guy and strip it. Just a couple ugga-duggas is all that needs. And then we wanna knock our lock washer over. Best way to do it is with a sharp cold chisel. So we just want to get in there, just like that. And then a little punch, and then just knock it over. Sweet. So now when I turn this, you'll be able to hear the difference. Feel how nice and positive that is? Ain't no way that guy's slipping. Stuck in 2 years. Sweet. So that is pretty well all this done. All we've got to do now is put our selectors in. These are our selectors. Same thing. I like to put a little bit of grease between here because those dogs are going to be spinning. If this doesn't have heaps of oil, it's not going to be ideal. Now these selector shafts can only go on one of these dogs because they're different sizes. You also got to make sure that you got them around the right direction. Your selector shaft won't go through if they're the wrong direction, or you'll definitely be able to see. So it's that, it's that. Yep, so you want to make sure both your little guys are pointing up. So our here selector shaft, there's an O-ring in here for this guy too. Fucking boots. Oh, try not to lose that. Done. Bit of grease on this guy once again. Slide him through the case this direction. Whole way through, and then there's, like I said, some of them have a little grub screw here. All the early stuff does. This guy has a circlip. Push that through till we can see the circlip. Where is said circlip? Here it is. Put that on. Try not to lose it in the bottom of the frickin' box. That would be the worst. Come on, mate. Yes. There it is. Selector shaft in. They all work nicely. Spin good. Yes, we do. So that's all that done. Make sure you don't lose these little guys on top. All we want to do now is put this side together. So, where is it? You want to get this guy, once again, a bit of grease on all this crap. Alright, so as it says in the book, this guy goes that direction. So he might need a little bit of help. Alright, so before you hammer this guy home, you can use this so you're not having to seat the outside and the ID at the same time. Leave this guy a little bit out. Put him on the ID to start with. Put it on there like that, just so you don't F it up. Like that, so then you're on the ID like that. Then you want a little trick piece. Don't try and knock this in because you'll put it on the piss and then you'll fuck it. So I've machined this guy. He's just a bit of aluminium and this is machined to the right size so I can put this on and then hit the top with a hammer. I think I need to tap the inner down a little bit. Just like that. A bit more on this guy. Now she's working. Sweet, you just want this guy nice and flush. Actually, we'll hammer it down a bit more. Sweet. And then we'll just make sure this guy is home. He is. And then before we do any more, I want to show you a little trick to make sure this guy seals up nicely. So you just want to clean all this. Really nicely clean all this. Your little hole here that I didn't clean up amazingly, I may add. It's alright. I want to clean all this up. So everything you can do to make this box seal a little bit better, you want to frickin' do, because these things do not seal very well. Alright, so that is all very nicely cleaned. What we're going to do, we're going to come along and fill these holes up with our Sikaflex. This is going to stop the leaks coming out of our end of our shafts. Because all they've got is those stupid O-rings and they always leak. So I always do this. This stops so much leaks. And if you weren't really stoked with how your seal went in, you can do your little seal edge too, like that. This one went in pretty nicely, but I'm just going to do it to show you. So that is that. Just gonna go over this. Don't worry about too much about getting it on anything else because it'll spin, make its home, it'll do what it wants. Awesome. So that is pretty well most of it put together. So let's go ahead and put our lid back on. So I dropped these off when I turned it over. I'm just going to put a bit of grease on these so they stay there. If you ever want to stick something in position so it doesn't move, grease is the frickin' best for that. So let's have a look at our lid and then whack that on too. Alright, so I have my lid here. I have it all cleaned up. I didn't bother changing the gasket on the selector here just because you got to pull all this crap apart, and I bet you it's going to be fine. So it never leaks out of there, so didn't see it. So basically I have my lid, have my hardware for the lid, and over here I have my gasket. So always make sure she's the right one first. Lines up mint. Now in this James kit, I usually like to go with a Cometic, but they are all sold out everywhere, so I had to go with a gasket, with a James gasket. I've never seen that before. So basically this says, lubricate sealing lip with grease or motor oil before assembly. Now they could have definitely worded that a bit better. By lip, they mean surfaces. That would have changed all the, that would have helped all the confusion, but whatever. So that is a little trick you do when you have a bad sealing surface. You just get it might seem crazy, just get a bit of grease like that and wipe it around the gasket, like a really thin layer of it. And what that does, believe it or not, this makes it seal better. When grease and stuff dries out, it actually goes really sticky and sticks stuff together really well. So go through, give that a really nice little thin layer of grease like this. Yeah, believe it or not, this helps it seal. So a nice little thin bit of grease like that. Whack him on there where he lives. That's that. While I have greasy hands, I'm going to put some grease on our selectors like that, and on our lid where it selects, just to help it a little bit. So wipe my hands, chuck this lid on, and I'm not going to put Loctite on this stuff, but I'm going to put thread sealer. And I'm putting thread sealer because some of these threads go through into the oil case. So to stop oil coming up through the threads, we use a sealer. It's not a Loctite, but it does just seal the threads a bit. So remember, this one bolt here is stuck, so that stays in there. So I'll seal that up and then we'll chuck this on. Make sure you put it around the right way. The other thing to make sure your lid's in neutral, which it is. You can tell by your little detent here. So each of these little notches here is a gear. 1, neutral, second, third, fourth. Super easy to work out where neutral is because it's each of your little divots are equally spaced, but there's one in the middle. 1, 2, 3 close together, your middle one is neutral. Make sure that's in neutral, and then neutral is when both your dogs are in the middle. So they go side to side, so both dogs in the middle, that's in neutral, lid's in neutral as well. Pop him on and he goes straight together. So start this guy, nice. So I'll just go through, put all these in, tighten them up, and then we will put the kicker on. Alright, so I have all the shit here to put my kicker back on now. First things first, don't forget to put your freaking clutch rod through here. Done this before, forgot to put that through. Super annoying. Perfect. Alright, so the kicker gear. What I like to do when putting these things on, a lot of people mess this up. I like to just take all the tension off the spring here and have your little ball here. So this is what stops it. So it stops it in your start location and stops it at the end of the stroke as well. I want to make sure that's at like 3 o'clock. Say if it's like this, so we say that's 1, 2, 3. Like I said, I'm sort of the opposite way around, whatever. That sort of position, have that set up. We get our freaking gasket here. Now see, this has a cardboard sort of side, and then it has this glue side. You want this glue side to be out. What the idea of this is so you can take the outer cover off and put it back on and not have to change gaskets. If it was like this side on both, it would pull the gasket off. So you want to keep it on that side. You just want to make sure you got this thing around the right way. See how it's got this little round here? You want to make sure that's on the bottom. So I've got this thing upside down. Boots, boots. There we go. Nope. So this needs to be like that. So change what I said. We're going to put the sticky side of the inside so the sticky bit sticks to our kicker cover here. So we'll go ahead and put this on. Make sure you're really ginger with this because they fucking break so easy. Especially with these long studs. Sometimes they're a bit bent on the outside. Makes it super annoying to put on. Do not fucking break them. Oh, fuck this shit. James gaskets are not great either. They don't line up very well. So basically it said oil the surface. This surface is pretty oiled already. I'm probably just going to put a bit of grease around it like that. Alright, and put this on. Sometimes you've got to pull your throwout bearing out a little bit to get it behind the gear. And then you can put this on, turn this a bit so that the gears mesh, and then that's that. I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on these threads just because they are out in the weather. If you were to get wet or whatever, these threads always see weather. So anti-seize will stop them from, obviously, seizing up, which is not what we want. So I'm just going to go through and put my nuts on. It helps to start with this one that's behind the clutch arm here. Sometimes you have to like pull the cover off a bit to put that on and then suck it on, but it worked. so that is basically a gearbox all done. I just have to put on my drive gear. The only thing is, the gear that I pulled off is a 23 tooth. That is super small. So this thing would probably do a hell of a rev on the highway. So I'm gonna make this bigger. I've got a 24, but I also have a 25. I'm worried the 25 is gonna be too tall. So I'm just gonna put a 24 on it and be done with it. It's gonna be better than what it was. And the other thing I have to do is finish off putting this guy on. So what we wanna do, just get some long nose pliers. You just wanna sort of hold the box somehow. Long nose pliers, jam them in there, and you can twist this thing just like that. Put it up there, and then I'll get the kicker and we can test it. So with the kicker, you just want to hold your main shaft at the same time, and you can hear the hear our return spring that we put heaps of pressure on. So that works an absolute treat. So that is pretty well the gearbox completely reassembled. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stick it in the bike and we can go for a test ride on this thing. Alright, so just something simple on our clutch nut here. So you can see that I have shortened mine, and the reason for that is my push rod is a bit short on this gearbox. So what's happening is the push rod has a taper on the end. So this thing was pissing out because the taper goes back inside behind our seals here, so it doesn't actually work properly. So what I did was I just put this in the machine and I machined off the bottom of it so that it goes deeper into our gearbox, so that when we do it up, you can see that when my clutch is at the back at its, fully disengaged position, my taper is still in front of the seals. So that means when it's sitting there on the stand, all the oil can't come past the push rod because the taper is still on the outside of my seals. So this bike was absolutely pissing out oil on the stand because when the clutch goes all the way back in, this taper was going behind the seals and the oil was just coming out past it. So that is a good little trick. Good little trick to stop your bike from leaking on its stand. Now, you're probably going to say, oh, but there's no lock washer behind here now. It doesn't matter because this is left-hand thread, spins the opposite way, and when you put like a Riviera clutch or Primo or something on your bike, you have to do this to it anyway. There's no lock washer. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Loctite in there, smash this on, and then this bike is pretty well good to test ride.